I want to start off by thanking all of you for coming to my little demonstration on shipbuilding. I know this is a strange turn of events from last year's presentation on demons, but given that there's been increased travel between different areas and a need to travel with a little bit more security without cluing anyone in the things that we might want to keep secret, I figure that this may be a good presentation to have for those gathered. To start, we should make sure that we review the ethics of having an actual ship, as well as how to be environmentally conscious of it. On average, building a pirate ship, like those you might see in Pirates of the Caribbean, cost you about $6 million to come up with all the materials. It would be about 120 feet long and weigh about 300,000 pounds. However, trading vessels with styles based on the 18th century East Indian trading companies cost about 40 million to build, according to figures in 2005, which did include fully detailed captain's quarters, working cannons, multiple mast sails, and a few decks to store materials in. So no matter what, when you're considering building a boat, you need to consider where you're going to be keeping it, as well as the cost of upkeep. The wood will need to be cared for, and pests such as barnacles and things like wood rot will need to be taken care of regularly. But this is not a presentation on how to care for the boat. It's just a presentation on how to build one. Just to give you an idea, there are a few different types of ships. The ones we will be talking about today are a full rigged ship, which has at least three masts. It's fully square rigged. A bark, which is 3 to 5 masts with a fore and aft rigged mizzen mast. The barkentine, 3 masts and only having the foremast that is square rigged. 3 mast schooners have 3 masts, a fully fore and aft rigged. The brig, which is 2 masts and fully square rigged. Something called a hermaphrodite brig, yes, hermaphrodite brig, or schooner brig, has 2 masts with a square rigged foremast and a fore and aft rigged mainmast. The topsail schooner has at least 2 masts and at least one of them with a square rigged masthead. A 2 mast schooner has 2 masts, fully fore and aft rigged. And last but not least, a sloop, which has 1 mast with a main and a head sail. Today, we're going to be building a brig, but it can be condensed down to a sloop if you shrink the proportions to about 20 feet long. Brigs typically carry up to 24 cannons. Though it can manage with the crew as little as 14 people, its prime efficiency is around 86 crewmates, maxing out at about 150 for the crew. These definitely needed some sort of wind in order to be effective. If it was forced to sail against the wind, it would struggle due to the heaviness of the ship with the large square mainsail. These ships, when made of pine in the 19th century, typically last a minimum of 20 years, but end up lasting a lot longer when you care for it. Brigs were designed to be small warships, and yes, they were the most popular among pirates. Building one of these brigs would take at least 20 able-bodied men and a few years to build it, assuming that they already had the materials to make the ship as well. During the winter months, the workers would have to haul the wood over the snow, since it would slide easier than going over grass and other shrubbery. By selecting a piece of ground near the water, they could cut the boat down and it could be slipped into the water or tipped in, so it could still freely float when it was all done. After that, you have to make sure that you have an ample supply of wood. White oak is one of the rarest and the heaviest woods that you can acquire for your ship. Cedar tends to be very aromatic and more common. Pine, which is the wood that you typically find at Home Depot, is the most common of the wood types. But it is a very soft wood and prone to absorbing things like water, which on a ship, maybe not the greatest thing. So here's where you're going to start. You're going to be making something called a keel block so that the boat can be tipped sideways into the water or slid into the water. After that, you're going to make the ship's frames or ribs. They're going to be bolted together in one almost U-shaped piece from the top side, then to the bilge, then under the ship, and then back up to the other top side on the other side of the vessel. These will slide across and on top of the keel plank and then hauled into an upright position by the block and the tackle. Now, these are going to need to be about 1 foot apart and then set perpendicular to the keel by a plumb line. Don't worry about doing all the pieces at once. Just move from one side of the ship down to the other, front to back or back to front. Just pick a side and stick to it. Now the frame itself is going to be set up amid the ship, and then afterwards you're going to set up the stem and the stem posts that are going to be placed in position and plumbed as we go. Now the planking the ship is started on either side of those keel planks. So how you do that is by first setting up a large flitch on a couple of sawhorses. You'll need to find a partner for this because your layout man, your bevel man, is going to be with a tape line and is going to take down the length for each plank. So, layout man or bevel man, with your bevel, you're going to take the angle at each frame and place a number on that frame and the level line on a small thin board held in the crook of your left arm. Once that's done, you're going to go to that flitch again. You're going to lay out those markings. Make sure that when you transfer the angles as well as the widths of the plank. Now the partner here, not the layout man, is going to represent the carpenters. Your job, carpenters, is to use the ship axe and aids to cut away the edges down to the chalk lines that your layout man made. Once that's done, you're going to make sure that you plane it, meaning you shave it down until it's the right level and leave a caulking seam. This is going to leave the outside of that plank narrower in the width than in the back, which will go against that frame and leave an open caulking seam of about 1/4 of an inch on the outside edges, running in 2/3 the thickness of those planks. Now, lucky for us, this place has a bunch of magics that are going to speed up this process for us. The planks on the bottom are going to be about 4 inches thick, each side, the keel planks, and about 8 inches wide. Once you get up to the bilge, that width will drop down to 6 inches or smaller for schooners. The side planks are going to vary in width from 6 to 8 inches amidship. But then, when they get to the bow and the stern, it's going to taper a bit. This is because every strake of the planks is maintained stem to stern, and the distance from the top of the stem to the forefoot is about half of that from the top side to the keep amidship, where the girth tends to be the greatest. Simply put, each ship has its own personality and body based on how its makers care for it. These ships have curves like a woman, and it's good to treat them with the same respect that you would give a woman as well. Now then, before I make a bunch of people making seaman jokes, pay attention to your whole planking before it goes on too long. Yeah, ha ha ha. So the deck beams of 12 inches square oak and timbers are going to be now placed and fastened at the top side of each frame running athwartship, so front to back. On them, you're going to lay planks 6 inches wide and 4 inches thick, on whose edges that caulking seam was planed into from the carpenters. These are very important not to have knots in them, so you'll have to cut the wood very, very carefully to make sure that doesn't happen. Now that you and your partner will have to work together again. With the deck beams placed and fastened, you're going to have to lay out those deck planks. You'll have to account for the hatches, which is strongly recommended that they be made of oak, since this is the part of the ship that will be constantly fighting things like weather, heat, cold, rain, dryness, feet, and shipping containers before they're taken below deck. Your beveler or your layout man is going to measure those openings, and the carpenter is going to fit the pieces so they fit perfectly to the crown of the deck by molding them. They're going to be strange shapes and sizes because you're going to be using every tool that you can to make them as tight a fit as possible. And any leak in your deck will cause your food to rot, your crew to be sick, and the water to leak in from above. So those steel squares that you used before in your carpenter's kit is not going to help you. You're just going to have to rely on your beveler to measure and your carpenter to follow directions. So now that you've practiced your deck tightening skills, it's time to apply your work to the sides. Start making the keelson of a 12 by 12 oak timber built into the bottom of the ship over the frames and in line with those keel planks for fore and aft and then stem to stern. If we were making a bigger ship, this could be as high as 5 feet and then all bolted together with those oak timbers. In the body of the ship, this is your backbone. This is your strength. This is what's keeping it all together. Do not, I repeat, do not use anything except ironwood or oak. If you can manage the ironwood, that'd be better. Now, with the backbone done, you're going to now plank the inside of that cargo hold. All right? So what you're going to need is 4 by 12 inch planks. These don't actually require a caulking seam planed in. This is just going to make sure that your vessel is reinforced. Start at the stem and move to the stern. Then from keel to the top side. Carpenters, you get to do more work now. You're going to adze down the entire outside of the planking, meaning you're going to make these planks so smooth that these ships almost shine with how sleek the planks are. In the old days, you'd use a small planer tool to get it done. A single plank could take a whole day. Now, thankfully, we have electricity to help us get close to where we need to be, and then we just make adjustments by hand later. And even further than that, we also unfairly have magic. Not something that all shipmen had in the 1800s. So now we're ready for the caulking of the deck. Yes, I know I'm very funny. Now, the outside of the hole, we're going to make it with a strand of cotton and 3 strands of oakum. Both the beveler and the carpenter are going to work together again to make sure that you drive the oakum over either overhead by getting under the ship and then putting the iron in, or the other way is sitting on a stool or a seat and driving that oakum underfoot. And yes, using an actual mallet. This is something you can't rush. You can't use an electric tool for this. It's going to be loud. And if you do it right, the oakum and the mallet will ring out loud and clear. If it rained in the old days, what you would do is you would sit in the loft and be just spinning oakum over your knee and folding into skeins over and over again until the weather let up. Now, go back to the beveler. You're now going to do a lot of work. So at this point, you're going to be shaping the masts, the yards, and the booms of the ship. You're going to need white pine logs, 28 inches in diameter, at the desk. And then it's going to be 108 feet long. That's right, 108 feet. You're going to square them first, and then you're going to make them 8-cornered, and then you're going to make them 15-quartered by adding in edges between the edges. You're going to do all of this with an axe. I'm not kidding. Once that's done, you're going to taper them from heel to truck, and then you're going to have your carpenter smooth them out and round them out using their planing tool. With that done, you can finally place your masts, your yards, and your booms on the ship, making sure that your riggers, which you guys are going to do together, went to work splicing the shrouds and the stays. You'll be doing this by hand, bending the sails on the yards and the booms before slicing the halyards and reaming the hem off the blocks. Now, for your ships, I have a special treat. Since I've been both lucky and unlucky enough to have sailed in oceans not of this world, I am able to lay a single set of runes onto your ships. But it will be up to you to imbue the power into those runes. I'm sure there's a few here that'll be able to do it, but I am sadly not one of them. Some of the ships that I have made, they are able to sail, if you want to call it that, in places that are without wind or without a reasonable way to move. But I'll leave that up to you guys to decide how that works. Thank you.